We are back, Peanut Gallery. We're talking about the modern day Maharaja.
Yes.
And like with the wrestling god, what is a Maharaja? Why did Jinder Mahal call himself this? Context.
Okay, so I found it really funny that he called himself the modern day, and I really found it funny that he called himself Maharaja. Let me explain. A Maharaja is a Sanskrit title for a great ruler or a great king or a high king. A few ruled mighty states informally called empires, including the ruler Maharaja Sri Gupta, founder of the ancient Indian Gupta Empire, and Chandragupta Maurya. Now, the problem is here's the first thing, is that title inflation soon led to most being either mediocre or even petty in real power, which led to compound titles being used in an attempt to distinguish some among their ranks. Another funny thing is that the title of Maharaja was not as common before the gradual British colonization of India, upon and after which many Rajas, otherwise styled Hindu rulers, were elevated to Maharajas, regardless of the fact that scores of these new Maharajas ruled small states. Sometimes, for some reason, unrelated to the eminence of the state, for example, support of the British in Afghanistan, World War I, or World War II, two Rajas who became Maharajas in the 20th century were the Maharaja of Cochin and Maharaja Jagajit Singh of Kapurthala. Very small and insignificant states. So essentially, Maharaja is not ancient. So calling himself modern day Maharaja is kind of
It's a double entendre almost.
Right. It's like, but Maharaja wasn't even a thing until after the British colonized you.
Right, and this was in the fucking 40s.
Right. So, anyways, we're going to go to the very interesting reign of Jinder Mahal. Now, hold on here.
Peanut Gallery is having an issue with trying to figure out why he called himself this.
Yes. So
obviously, that is context of what a Maharaja is.
Yes. So it is very interesting. So here's what happened. Sometime in the early 2010s, WWE changed their entire promotional strategy in a major way. The days of Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, The Rock, and John Cena were over. No longer would the company focus their promotional machine around creating megastars, which transcended power to become bigger than WWE itself into the wider pop culture. Instead, the focus would be all around the brand. The overarching WWE brand, which wrestlers are interchangeable cogs in a larger machine. With this new philosophy, WWE wouldn't ever have to worry about losing big money if their chosen franchise player failed or left for greener pastures. Instead, no one star could ever become bigger than what the company allowed, and any could be replaced at any time. And is the case as we look at today with the perfect example of that interchangeability on display. Today, we look at one of the most surprising creative and promotional decisions in modern WWE history. It's one that, from a logical and creative standpoint, doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Right.
But from a financial perspective, was supposed to be guaranteed moneymaker, but managed to fail at doing that as well. It was one of the most out of left field decisions in SmackDown history. Jinder Mahal's WWE Championship run in 2017. The decision was one of the dumbest decisions in modern WWE history. It was done without any sense of forethought, other than the desire for the stockholders to cash in on a supposedly lucrative fan market in India. And the decision to push someone that looked like an Indian instead of someone that the Indian people actually liked ended up costing the WWE a lot of money while also harming other wrestlers' careers in the process.
Oh.
As you can imagine, the story of the most out-of-left-field WWE champion begins with the most out-of-left superstar in WWE history, Enzo Amore. Now, Enzo Amore had all of the powers that most WWE wrestlers could only dream of. Trash-talking everyone in creative ways, being good in the ring, but he had all the reign in the world to do whatever he wanted on microphone, and one of his targets was Jinder Mahal. In his promo on Mahal, Enzo made lightning-quick quips about Mahal's veiny new physique and how it made his body look like a road map. And it wasn't just the few extra pounds of muscle that Mahal gained. He looked completely different than he was before. He was jacked, and by jacked, I mean he spent months lifting cars while enjoying a diet composed of Ultimate Warrior's abs.
Okay, that was interestingly sentenced.
That remark by Enzo started a chain of events that would eventually lead Mahal to unexpected success. Though a few of us here, if any, know Vince McMahon on a personal level, there have been plenty of people that we have worked with that have shared anecdotes about the most hermit-like Vince and what his likes and dislikes are. Okay. And one of the biggest likes is muscular physiques. This is an asset that he saw in Mahal and decided it was good enough to give the man's career a revisit. And so Mahal was drafted to SmackDown after WrestleMania 33, and the show had many top-level stars on the draft. To widen the field of title, Challengers Battle Royale was held to crown new number one contender. It was then composed of Ziggler and 5 other wrestlers that had never been seen in contention for a top title before: Harper, Rowan, Raleigh, Sami Zayn, and Jinder Mahal. Well, guess who won that one? Jinder Mahal defeated Randy Orton to become the WWE champion at WWE Backlash in 2017. And Mahal didn't end up being a transitional champion either. He held the title for 6 months and main evented multiple high-profile shows. The first reaction that came out of fans at ringside when Jinder Mahal was crowned the new WWE champion was laughter. They were laughing at the absurdity of what they just witnessed, instead of being shocked as WWE had hoped that they and others would be. By becoming the WWE champion, Mahal turned into the Modern Day Maharaja and had his own entourage in the form of the Singh brothers. These two became crucial to Mahal's title run because they became staples of his title defenses. More often than not, they would interfere in some way in Mahal's matches long enough for Mahal to capitalize and score a cheap win. This went on for months and led Mahal scoring high-profile wins over Orton and then another SmackDown debutant, Shinsuke Nakamura. Mahal's rival with the latter was considered a disappointment, not only due to bad matches, but also because several promos were at best insulting and at worst downright racist. But despite all of the criticism and jeering Mahal got, the WWE continued with the project anyway. Why? Because Mahal's push was meant to help WWE's brand grow in the Indian market. They wanted to capitalize on the growing fan market, and someone decided the local Indian fans would be more willing to shell out money for WWE and their products with a top star that was Indian, or at least looked like and pretended to be one. Ironically, Mahal's actually Canadian that grew up in Calgary. And he was actually congratulated by the Legislative Assembly of Alberta. The goal of Mahal was to increase fan interest in India and thus increase revenue from a tour there that was meant to take place in September of that year. They also hoped his run would increase WWE Network subscriptions in India. In a hilariously ironic twist, all WWE events, including pay-per-views, aired for free across all of India, rendering network subscriptions completely moot. By the time SummerSlam 2017 ended and Mahal, still WWE champion, their plans for a successful tour in India had never materialized. The actual tour, which was supposed to take place in September, had not even yet been announced, and then it was postponed until December. But between those two dates was Survivor Series, and the marquee match was champion versus champion match between Brock Lesnar and Jinder Mahal. Brock, being smarter than most people give him credit for, recognized that no one wanted to see him face Mahal, since Mahal was nowhere near credible enough to face him. Thus, WWE made a quick decision to have Mahal lose AJ Styles before that pay-per-view on the November 7th edition of SmackDown to many people. That ended up saving the Survivor Series show, as Lesnar vs. Styles ended up being actually a good match. As for Mahal, he still went to the India show. The tour ended up being reduced to a solitary show with poor ticket sales. I mean, who would have thought, right? But without his championship, without a rematch for it, he faced Triple H instead, and in front of people he was supposed to represent as champion, got pedigreed and lost. There is a term used in professional wrestling called a paper champion. It applies in the case because it has dual meaning. First, it suggests that an idea, in this case Mahal as WWE champion, is a good idea on paper but not in practice. Second, it suggests that the person in question is so weak and lacking in credibility that they're weak as paper. Both apply fully in this case, and here's why. At first, some people actually liked the idea of Mahal as WWE champion. I liked it myself. He wasn't an obvious choice for the brand centerpiece, and some people had grown tired of seeing the same indie guys show up in NXT and elsewhere. Those people want to see a true homegrown WWE guy become champion, and Mahal was their guy, but the novelty of his status as the best wrestler of the roster wore thin very fast. As a wrestler, Mahal wasn't great, but he wasn't terrible either. He was just average. Nothing he did was truly unique or eye-catching. He wrestled a very average style, and nothing really jumped out at his viewers in a very special way. Even his finisher, had used almost a decade earlier, looked like the lightest impact move anyone could take, because that was a Cobra Clutch Slam that Ted DiBiase Jr. had used. But the issue pales in comparison to Mahal's biggest problem, his complete and utter lack of credibility. Prior to his main event push, Mahal was a lower card guy through and through, of course, being part of the comedy trio 3MB. After being released in 2014, he returned in 2016 and was thrust back into the lower card. Basically, he claimed to have found inner peace and wanted to spread that to others. Why he decided to bring peace to an industry driven by an interpersonal war is beyond me. And even during both of those runs, his win-loss record was more lopsided than anyone's. Prior to 2017, Mahal had never wrestled for any title, never won a match on pay-per-view, never garnered any major wins against anyone remotely credible. During his first run, he lost 3 matches in a row in one show. The longest of those matches was 4 minutes long, and if that wasn't enough, one of his career statistics includes a loss to the Brooklyn Brawler, the most famous jobber in WWE history. Now, all this could have been salvaged had if WWE given the main event push some time to develop, from the moment he debuted on SmackDown to his WWE title, when he didn't really convince anyone he was credible. In fact, when he became number 1 contender, Randy Orton came out to cut a promo, but his target wasn't Mahal. Man who'd be challenging for the coveted title was Bray Wyatt, a wrestler on a completely different show. Orton himself didn't care one bit about Mahal's contender. And yet, WWE still went ahead with Mahal as their chosen cog to play the role of WWE champion. And he beat Orton to become the Modern Day Maharaja. Mahal never cut a promo explaining what the term actually means, but we've kind of gone over that. But not even that provided an explanation. Instead, viewers were treated to this nugget of wisdom from JBL, who was commentator at the time, and seen by many as Vince McMahon's direct mouthpiece. That's about as close to a complete non-answer as one can get. India, one of the most culturally and linguistically and religiously diverse countries on the planet, and yet somehow Mahal was meant to represent all of them, and everyone living there sound like a stretch, but once again, no explanation was provided. Ironically, JBL is actually a great case study to compare with Mahal. In 2004, the Bradshaw character transformed JBL overnight. The former wild barroom brawler that seemed like a mid-carder for life transformed into a rich, snooty businessman, complete with a stretch limo and enough money to buy his own cabinet. And that man became WWE champion and held it for the longest period in SmackDown history until Styles, ironically, broke that record 12 years later. JBL was a guy who was thrust in the main event scene seemingly overnight, and people were expected to take him seriously as a main eventer. But unlike Mahal, JBL told everyone what he'd become, what he represented, what he was going to do.
Right.
What?
Sorry. No, I said right. No, the comparison's like...
Sorry.
Easy.
And his run was way more successful than it had any right to be. Sure, matches were underwhelming, to say the least, but the promo and character was fantastic. He was marvelous at getting people to hate him and made anyone look like a hero when challenging him, which we had discussed last week. Mahal's problems were exacerbated by just how badly his matches were booked. He never won a big match on his own. The Singh brothers interfered on every single occasion. I understand that was meant to annoy the fans the same way that J&J Security did in Rollins' matches, but the difference between them is that Rollins was also an impeccable wrestler in his own right and could stand on his own 2 feet. Mahal was represented in a way when he required help from these 2 men.
Right.
And the reason... And the reason that it was so bad was because Mahal, it just looked like he didn't have like 2 feet to stand on. He always relied on others. And it was made even worse when he was put in special stipulation matches like the Punjabi prison, when he relied on not only the Singh brothers, but also the great fucking Khali to win the match for him. And, I mean, that's kind of what's been going on. And WWE tried to justify pushing Mahal by saying his push was enabling them just to get a potentially lucrative market in India, but WWE pulled an old card. That just doesn't work. He tried to pander to a specific ethnicity, nationality by pushing someone that looked like them. That was WWE's mentality.
And guess what? It didn't work in India too.
Right.
That's why they took the belt off of him, because even in the country that they wanted to push, it didn't work there.
And I mean, you look at the
because he was a heel,
right? and you look at the comments, and almost any WWE related video on YouTube is all negative.
Right.
They were just as pissed off about Jinder Mahal as anybody else was.
Right. And it's not Jinder Mahal's fault. He really improved, and I thought he was a decent wrestler. I didn't think he was all that bad. He was just there.
Right.
And, you know, if he went for the title now, I may or may not be as pissed off, because I could tell that he really worked hard to be in that position. But it was really more of a booking problem than than an actual Jinder Mahal problem.
And here's what I want to end with. Is the saddest part through all this is how much of a missed opportunity this was. WWE had a golden opportunity to create one of the best rags to riches storyline years, if not decades. Mahal spent years losing to everyone under the sun, sometimes to an embarrassing degree, yet Vince pulled the trigger on him and wanted to become WWE champion. With a little bit of patience and better wrestling, they could have had the perfect story of Mahal overcoming his past struggles to reach the top of the company. It could have been an inspirational story in the same vein as Kofi Kingston's unexpected rise to the top, and it would have worked because WWE had plenty of material to show how low Mahal had gone, how far he had come. But instead, they turned him into just another bland, foreign character who just relied on cheating and everything else to get away with the win.
Your same cookie-cutter shit as every foreign heel.
Manufactured promos, zero credibility. And how are the people in India supposed to react to that man, one way or the other?
Right.
When they had never actually been there prior to this run. So it was probably one of the most short-sighted decisions in WWE creative history.
Oh yeah, I could see that.
But you know, when you, like I said, when you're comparing JBL to Jinder Mahal, JBL was just miles above.
Oh yeah.
Just because of his promo work. Now, the circumstances were exactly the same. Here you have 2 guys who are, like, one day they're mid-carders, and then the next day they're main eventers.
Right.
But JBL had a purpose.
Right.
Whereas
and also JBL was like a financial wizard outside of wrestling.
But it could have worked for Jinder Mahal had he been given the right character to push.
Right. But they give him the Modern Day Maharaja, which is
chicken shit heel
to
work with.
And that's not a Maharaja.
No.
I mean,
actually it kind of is. It's actually really ironic. Because Maharajas in India would give themselves the title of Maharaja.
They're like,
it was just an ego stroking, like,
right. I even looked at it, and I think right now in India there are like 6 different people who claim to be the true Maharaja,
but there isn't.
Right.
That title was never a thing until the British came in.
Right in the 40s,
and people would just claim to be this. Here's my title.
Right, I'm the Maharaja. It's essentially like a cult leader saying that they're second incarnation of Christ. Right. It's literally the same thing.
Right. So, is Jinder Mahal Modern Day Maharaja? Yes, he is, but not in a good way.
Right. Anyway, so when we come back, we're going to talk about the wrestling lesson of the Royal Rumble on stuff that you may or may not even know.
Hooray.
Yay.